For a whole year. I secretly paid every single one of my family's bills, cutting my own meals, working bone-crushing night shifts until I could barely stand, only to have my mother humiliate me at dinner, telling everyone I never contributed anything. I stayed silent long enough, but when I discovered the truth about where my money really went and what they were doing behind my back, I realized silence wasn't an option anymore. It was time for them to learn exactly what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. My name is Haley Monroe, and at 34, I thought I'd finally learned to expect nothing from my family. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday afternoon at Everline Foods, the kind of gray Milwaukee day that seeps through the warehouse windows and settles into your bones. I was hunched over my desk in the quality control office, squinting at production reports from the morning shift. Line 3 had been running behind quota again, something about the new packaging equipment jamming every few hours. The familiar hum of conveyor belts and the sharp smell of industrial disinfectant filled the air as I marked down equipment maintenance requests. My phone buzzed once, then again. Then it started ringing. I glanced at the screen and saw Mom flashing across it. My stomach dropped the way it always did when they called during work hours. Emergency calls never brought good news in my family. Haley, my supervisor, Marcus, appeared at my cubicle. You need to take that, sounds urgent. I nodded and stepped into the break room, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead as I answered. Mom, what's wrong? What's wrong? Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. What's wrong is that I just got off the phone with your brother, and I'm absolutely disgusted with you. My heart started pounding. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb with me, Haley. Brandon told me everything about how you've been lying to us, pretending to help when you're barely sending us pocket change. The words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the edge of the break room table, my knuckles turning white. Mom, I don't understand. I've been sending you $2,200 every month for almost a year now. I have the bank statements. $2,200. She let out a bitter laugh. Try 22 cents. Honey, Brandon showed me the records. He's the one who's been keeping us afloat, sending over $3,000 a month while you contribute practically nothing. The room started spinning. I sat down hard in one of the plastic chairs, staring at the motivational poster on the wall, something about teamwork and success, while my mother's words echoed in my head. I worked double shifts at the frozen storage warehouse, I whispered. I sold my camera equipment. I've been living on instant ramen and peanut butter sandwiches so I could send you that money. Oh, spare me the sob story. Your brother has real responsibilities, a real career, and he's still managing to take care of his family, unlike some people who can't even be bothered to help their own parents keep the lights on. Each word was a knife twist. This was my mother, the woman who'd raised me, who I'd been trying so desperately to support, even as I struggled to make rent on my tiny studio apartment. Mom, there has to be a mistake. Let me check my bank app right now. Don't insult my intelligence. Haley, Brandon brought the documentation. $3,400 from him every month under the name Hunter Gray, and your pathetic little contributions that barely cover our coffee budget. I called to tell you that if you can't step up like an adult, then maybe you shouldn't bother sending anything at all. The line went dead. I sat there in the fluorescent-lit break room, surrounded by the smell of microwaved leftovers and burned coffee, feeling like I'd been gutted. Through the small window, I could see the afternoon shift workers heading to their stations, their faces tired but determined, normal people living normal lives, probably not having their entire reality demolished by a single phone call. My hands shook as I opened my banking app. Transaction after transaction, all clearly labeled, transfer to Patricia Monroe, $2,200. Every month, like clockwork, for 11 months straight. The total was staggering over $24,000 that I'd scraped together by working myself into exhaustion. I thought about the nights I'd spent in that freezing warehouse, stacking boxes until my fingers went numb, the meals I'd skipped, the way I'd had to choose between buying new work shoes or keeping my phone service active, all of it so I could help the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. And somehow, according to my own mother, none of it had ever happened. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on my narrow mattress in my studio apartment, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a twisted face in the dim light from the street lamp outside. My mother's words kept replaying in my head, but they weren't the only voices haunting me. The memories came flooding back like they always did when I felt this small, this worthless. I was 8 years old again, standing in the music store downtown, watching my parents write a check for Brandon's first violin. He was 6 then, barely tall enough to hold the instrument properly, but our father's eyes shone with pride as he talked about Brandon's natural talent and bright future. When I asked if I could take photography classes at the community center, they only cost $40. Mom had sighed and said we needed to focus our resources where they'd make the biggest impact. "Brandon has real potential, honey," she'd explained, her hand resting on my brother's shoulder. "Photography is just a hobby." Even at 8, I understood the translation Brandon mattered more. The pattern continued through middle school. Brandon got the latest video games, the name brand clothes, the fancy calculator for his advanced math classes. I learned to shop at thrift stores and tell people my secondhand clothes were vintage. When high school arrived, the disparity became impossible to ignore. I was 14 when they decided Brandon needed his own room. Not just any room, my room. The one with the big window that faced the backyard, where I'd spent countless afternoons reading and sketching by natural light. "Brandon's getting older," Dad had announced over dinner one evening. "He needs privacy for his music practice. Haley, you'll be more comfortable downstairs." Comfortable was a generous word for the converted basement space they moved me into. The ceiling was so low that I had to duck under the exposed pipes. The single window was ground level, offering a view of feet walking by on the sidewalk. During Milwaukee's brutal winters, the space was so cold I could see my breath some mornings. The humidity made everything smell like mildew, and I learned to keep my books in plastic bags to prevent the pages from warping. But the worst part wasn't the damp walls or the mice that scratched in the ceiling at night. It was the sound of Brandon's violin drifting down through the floorboards above me, the instrument that had cost more than a year of photography classes, played in the warm, bright room that used to be mine. High school brought new indignities. While Brandon got a car for his 16th birthday, nothing fancy. But still, I took the bus everywhere, even in the snow. When he needed money for band camp or new sheet music, it appeared without question. When I asked for $20 to develop film from my disposable camera, I got a lecture about financial responsibility. "You need to learn the value of money," Mom would say. "Brandon works hard for his music education. If you want photography supplies, get a job." So I did. I worked at a sandwich shop after school, coming home smelling like pickles and mustard, saving every dollar for the used camera equipment I dreamed of buying. But somehow, those savings always ended up going to family emergencies, car repairs, unexpected bills, Brandon's music competition fees. "Family comes first," Dad would say when I handed over my paycheck. "We all have to make sacrifices." But it never seemed like Brandon made any sacrifices. He certainly didn't work after school. He needed time for practice, for homework, for all the opportunities they were creating for him. I understood my role in the family ecosystem. I was the worker bee, the one who contributed labor while others pursued their dreams. College was the cruelest joke of all. Brandon got accepted to a prestigious music conservatory with partial scholarship, and my parents took out loans to cover the rest. "It's an investment in his future," they explained. When I graduated high school with decent grades and dreams of studying photojournalism, I was told that college wasn't realistic for our family's financial situation. "You're more practical-minded anyway," Mom had said. "College isn't for everyone. You'll do fine with a trade or something." So, while Brandon studied music theory and composition 3 states away, I enrolled in a community college program for food safety certification. Not exactly glamorous, but it led to my job at Everline Foods, which led to steady paychecks, which led to my ability to help support the family that had never quite supported me. And here I was, 15 years later, lying in an apartment I could barely afford, having just been told that my sacrifices meant nothing, that the money I'd bled for was somehow invisible, while Golden Boy Brandon was the family hero once again. The bitterness rose in my throat like bile. I thought about all those nights in the freezing warehouse, my hands so cold I could barely grip the inventory scanner. I thought about the meals I'd skipped, the social invitations I'd declined because I couldn't afford to go out. Every dollar I'd sent home had been carved out of my own survival, and somehow it had never existed at all. 3 days after that devastating phone call, Brandon reached out, not with an apology or explanation, but with what he called a solution. I was eating a dinner of instant ramen again when my phone buzzed with his text. "Hey sis, can we talk? I have an idea that might help everyone." Against my better judgment, I called him back. His voice was smooth, confident, the same tone he'd used to convince our parents he deserved everything while I deserved scraps. "Haley, I feel terrible about what happened with Mom," he began, though he didn't sound terrible at all. "I think there's been a misunderstanding about the money situation." Misunderstanding. I nearly choked on my noodles. "Brandon, I've been sending $2,200 a month for almost a year. How is that a misunderstanding?" Right. And I really appreciate that you want to help. Look, I've been thinking, what if we coordinated our efforts, made it official?" I set down my chopsticks, suspicion creeping up my spine. "What do you mean?" "Well, I've been able to contribute quite a bit more because, my consulting work has been going really well. But I think it would mean a lot to Mom and Dad if we both stepped up together, really showed them we're a team." The word team coming from Brandon's mouth was laughable. When had we ever been a team? When I was sleeping in a moldy basement while he practiced violin in my old room, when I worked after school while he focused on his artistic development. But there was something in his voice, a hint of the old charm that had always made our parents melt. Maybe this was my chance. Maybe, finally, we could be equals in something. "What are you proposing?" I asked carefully. "I'm thinking we pool our contributions. I can handle $3,800 a month total, and you could cover your usual amount. We'll coordinate the transfers so Mom and Dad see we're both committed to supporting them." $3,800. The number hit me like a freight train. That was more than I made in a month after taxes. How was he managing that much while I was barely scraping together my share? "Brandon, that's a lot of money. Are you sure you can handle that much?" "Business is booming," he said with a laugh. "Besides, they're our parents. They took care of us for 18 years. This is the least we can do." The guilt hit exactly where he intended it to. Here I was, questioning his generosity while struggling to match even a portion of his contribution. Maybe I had been selfish, sending what I thought was a substantial amount while he was truly carrying the family. "Okay," I said slowly. "How would we coordinate this?" "Simple. I'll use a business account under my consulting name, Hunter Gray. Keeps things clean for tax purposes. You can continue using your personal account. We'll just make sure the timing works out so they see both contributions clearly." Hunter Gray. It sounded professional, successful, everything I wasn't. Everything Brandon had always been in our parents' eyes. I'd need to pick up more shifts to make my part work, I admitted, hating how small my voice sounded. "That's the spirit I knew I could count on you. Haley, this is going to mean so much to them, seeing us work together like this." After we hung up, I stared at my phone for a long time. $3,800 a month. Brandon was contributing nearly twice what I was, and he made it sound effortless. Meanwhile, I was already working myself into exhaustion just to manage my current contribution. But for the first time in my life, Brandon was treating me like an equal partner in something. He'd called me reliable, said he could count on me. Maybe this was how family was supposed to work, everyone contributing what they could, supporting each other. The next morning, I walked into Marcus's office and asked about picking up additional overnight shifts in the frozen storage warehouse. The work was brutal 10-hour shifts in sub-zero temperatures, moving inventory and conducting quality checks on products that had to be stored at -20 degrees Fahrenheit. But it paid time and a half, and it was the only way I could make the math work. "You sure about this, Monroe?" Marcus asked, looking concerned. "Those overnight shifts are tough. We've had people burn out pretty quickly." "I'm sure," I said. "I need the extra income." Within a week, I was working 7 days a week, 5 regular shifts in the main facility, then 2 overnight shifts in the warehouse that felt like working inside a giant freezer. I'd come home at 7 in the morning, sleep for a few hours, then get up to do it all over again. I sold my grandmother's jewelry, the only nice things I owned. I canceled my already minimal streaming subscriptions. I started buying the cheapest possible groceries, generic pasta, day-old bread, whatever vegetables were marked down for quick sale. My life became a cycle of work, sleep, and calculating whether I could afford both laundry detergent and lunch for the week. But it was worth it, I told myself. For the first time, Brandon and I were truly partners in taking care of our family. For the first time, I wasn't the forgotten daughter who barely contributed anything worthwhile. I should have known better. In my family, there was never room for 2 heroes, and Brandon had claimed that role long before I was even born. The call came on a Saturday morning in March, jarring me awake after only 3 hours of sleep. I'd just finished another overnight shift in the frozen warehouse, and my body ached in places I didn't know could ache. The caller ID showed Dad, and my heart immediately started racing. "Haley." His voice was cold, disappointed, the tone I remembered from childhood whenever I'd failed to meet expectations. "Your mother and I need to have a serious conversation with you." I sat up in bed, instantly alert despite my exhaustion. "What's wrong? Is someone hurt?" "What's wrong is your attitude about supporting this family. We just reviewed our bank statements, and frankly, we're disgusted." The words hit me like ice water. "I don't understand. I've been sending my share every month, exactly like Brandon and I agreed." 50 cents, Haley, 50 goddamn cents. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "What?" "You heard me. While Hunter Gray has been faithfully sending us $3,400 every month, money that's kept us afloat during some very difficult times, you've been sending pocket change. Literally." My hands started shaking. I fumbled for my phone, opening the banking app with trembling fingers. "Dad, that's impossible. I've been sending $2,200 every month. Let me check." "Don't lie to me." His voice was sharp enough to cut. "We have the statements right here. March 15th, Hunter Gray, $3,400. March 15th, Haley Monroe, 50 cents. February 15th, Hunter Gray, $3,400. February 15th, Haley Monroe, 50 cents. Should I keep going?" I scrolled through my transaction history, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. There they were, clear as day. Transfer to Patricia Monroe, $2,200. Transfer to Patricia Monroe, $2,200. Month after month, exactly as I'd been sending them. "Dad, I'm looking at my bank app right now. Every transfer shows $2,200. Every single one." "Are you calling your mother and me liars?" The question hung in the air like a threat. In my family, questioning my parents' version of reality had never been tolerated, but I was staring at the evidence on my phone screen, black and white, undeniable. "No, sir, there must be some kind of error, maybe with the bank systems, or—" "The only error here is thinking you could get away with this pathetic charade. Your brother Brandon has been carrying this family while you've been playing games." Brandon. Of course this came back to Brandon. "Where is Brandon getting $3,400 a month?" I asked, genuinely confused. The last I'd heard, he was doing freelance music lessons and occasional gig work. That kind of income seemed impossible. "Unlike some people, your brother has built a successful consulting business. Hunter Gray Associates is doing very well. Thank you very much. He's actually contributing to this family instead of just pretending to." Hunter Gray Associates. The name sounded impressive, professional. I felt a familiar stab of inadequacy. Here I was, working myself to death in a frozen warehouse, while Brandon had apparently built some kind of consulting empire. I don't understand how this happened, I said weakly. My bank clearly shows. Enough. Your mother doesn't even want to talk to you right now. She's heartbroken that her own daughter would lie to her like this. $2,200. He let out a harsh laugh. You can't even spare $22, apparently. The line went dead. I sat there in my tiny apartment, staring at my phone screen. The numbers didn't lie. $200 to $200 transferred on the 15th of every month for the past 6 months since Brandon and I had started our coordination. But according to my parents, those transfers had somehow become 50 cents each. My phone buzzed with a text from Brandon. Hey, heard from Dad. Sorry there's some confusion about the money. Bank errors happen sometimes. Right. Don't stress about it. Bank errors. He made it sound so casual, like a minor inconvenience instead of the complete destruction of my credibility with our parents. I stared at his message for a long time, something cold and ugly growing in my stomach. I called my bank's customer service line and spent 45 minutes on hold, then another 30 minutes explaining the situation to a representative who sounded like she was reading from a script. Ma'am, I'm showing all your transfers to Patricia Monroe went through successfully for the full amounts. $2,200 each time, cleared and deposited into the recipient's account. There haven't been any errors or adjustments on our end. But the recipients are saying they only received 50 cents each time. That's unusual. You might want to ask them to check with their bank. Sometimes there can be display errors, or if they have multiple accounts, the funds might have been deposited elsewhere. I hung up feeling more confused than ever. My bank said the money had been transferred. My parents said they'd only received 50 cents. Someone was lying, but I couldn't figure out who or why. That evening, I texted Brandon again. Can you double-check with Mom and Dad about the amounts my bank confirms all transfers went through for the full $2,200? His response came back quickly. Already talked to them. They're pretty upset right now. Maybe give them some space to cool off. I'm sure everything will work out. Everything will work out. The same thing he'd said when I was moved to the basement, when I couldn't afford college, when every opportunity in my life had somehow evaporated while his multiplied. I looked around my cramped apartment at the second-hand furniture, the empty refrigerator, the stack of bills I'd been juggling to make room for my family contributions. I thought about the double shifts, the freezing warehouse, the meals I'd skipped, the social life I'd sacrificed. All of it for 50 cents. I couldn't take it anymore. The confusion, the accusations, the way nothing made sense, it was eating me alive. Sunday evening, I called the one person I knew would listen without judgment, Lena Rodriguez, my roommate from college and the smartest person I'd ever known. Lena had graduated with a degree in data analytics and now worked for a major e-commerce company in Chicago, specializing in fraud detection and financial irregularities. If anyone could help me figure out what was happening with my family's money situation, it was her. Haley, God, it's been forever. How are you? Her voice was warm, familiar, like a lifeline thrown to a drowning person. I think I'm losing my mind. Lena, I need your help with something, and I know it's going to sound crazy. Try me. You know I love a good mystery. I told her everything. The phone calls, the accusations, Brandon's consulting business, the bank transfers that somehow became 50 cents. Lena listened without interrupting, occasionally making small humming sounds that I remembered from our late-night study sessions when she was working through complex problems. Okay, she said when I finished. This is definitely weird. Can you send me Brandon's full name and any business information you have about this Hunter Gray Associates? You think you can find something? Oh, honey, I can find out what someone had for breakfast 3 weeks ago if I put my mind to it. Give me 24 hours. The next evening, Lena called back. Her voice had changed. There was an edge to it that made my stomach clench. Haley, we need to talk. Are you sitting down? What did you find? Your brother is a liar, a really, really good liar, but still a liar. I gripped the phone tighter. What do you mean? Hunter Gray Associates doesn't exist. I mean, technically it exists as a registered business name in Wisconsin, but it's never filed any tax returns, never had any reported income, never had any employees. It's a shell. My apartment suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing in around me. But he's been sending $3,400 a month. According to who your parents think about it. Haley, who told you about that money in the first place. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Brandon. Brandon had told me he was contributing more. Brandon had suggested we coordinate our efforts. Brandon had set up this whole arrangement. I looked deeper into your brother's background. Lena continued. He's not running a consulting business. He's not even employed anywhere that I can find. But I did find some interesting social media activity. What kind of activity? Photos from expensive restaurants, new clothes with designer tags still on them, a post from last week showing off some kind of high-end audio equipment. Either your brother is living way beyond his means, or he's getting money from somewhere he doesn't want people to know about. I thought about my own life, the instant ramen dinners, the second-hand clothes, the empty savings account. While I'd been working myself into the ground, Brandon had been living like he was successful. There's more, Lena said gently. I did some digging on your parents' social media, too. I hope you don't mind. But I wanted to get the full picture. What did you find? Your mom posted photos from a casino in Green Bay 2 weeks ago. Expensive-looking dinner, slot machines. She was wearing what looked like a brand-new outfit. Your dad's been posting about some kind of sports betting group he joined. And last month, there were pictures of them at a high-end electronics store, buying what looked like a new sound system. The room started spinning. Casino, sports betting, new electronics. While they were calling me to scream about 50-cent contributions, they were gambling and shopping. Haley, you still there? I think I'm going to be sick. I know this is a lot to process, but there's one more thing. I cross-referenced the timing of your bank transfers with your parents' spending patterns on social media. Every major purchase, every casino visit, every expensive dinner, they all happened within a few days of when you sent money. The truth crashed over me like a wave. My $2,200 wasn't disappearing into some bank error. It was going exactly where I'd intended it to go to my parents. But instead of using it for bills and necessities like they'd claimed, they were using it to fund their entertainment while telling me I wasn't contributing anything. But why would they lie to me about the amounts? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. Because if they admitted you were sending substantial money, they'd have to admit what they were doing with it. This way, they get to keep taking your money while making you feel like garbage for not contributing enough. It's psychological manipulation, plain and simple. And Brandon? I guess he's not sending them anything. He's probably getting money from them instead. Think about it if they're living off your contributions. Where else would he get the funds for his lifestyle? I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. While I'd been breaking my back to support the family, Brandon had been getting supported by the family, with my money, and they were all lying to me about it. Haley, this isn't just unfair. This is financial abuse. They're exploiting you while gaslighting you into thinking you're the problem. I sat in the dark of my apartment, surrounded by the evidence of my own sacrifice, empty cupboards, unpaid personal bills, furniture that was falling apart. Everything I'd given up, every comfort I'd denied myself, had been so my family could live comfortably while telling me I wasn't good enough. What do I do? I whispered. That's up to you. But if it were me, I'd stop sending money immediately and see how long it takes for the truth to come out. After we hung up, I stared at my phone for a long time. $24,000. That's how much I'd sent them over the past year. Money that could have gotten me a decent apartment, a reliable car, maybe even a few classes to improve my job prospects. Instead, it had funded their entertainment while they convinced me I was worthless. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of instant coffee, the cheap kind that tasted like burnt water, and made the most liberating decision of my adult life. I was done. I opened my banking app and canceled the recurring transfer to my parents. The automated system asked if I was sure. warning me about potential fees for stopping scheduled payments. I clicked confirm without hesitation. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Then I went further. I changed my phone number. It was surprisingly easy, a quick call to my carrier, a new SIM card picked up during my lunch break. When they asked if I wanted to keep my old number, I almost laughed. Why would I want to keep a number that only brought me pain? Next, I blocked my family on every social media platform I could think of. Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn, anywhere they might try to reach me. With each block, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. But I wasn't done yet. Lena had taught me the value of documentation, and I started methodically saving evidence, screenshots of every bank transfer, photos of my account statements. I downloaded and printed everything, creating a paper trail that couldn't be disputed or mysteriously disappear. I screenshotted Brandon's social media posts, the expensive dinners, the designer clothes, the audio equipment. I saved the text messages where he'd lied about bank errors and told me not to worry. Every casual dismissal, every deflection, now looked different in light of what I knew. The hardest part was the waiting. I knew it wouldn't take long for them to notice the missing money. My contributions had apparently become essential to their lifestyle, even if they pretended I was worthless. I just had to be patient. It took exactly 12 days. I was restocking inventory in the main warehouse when Marcus approached me, looking uncomfortable. "Monroe, there are some people here to see you. They're persistent." My heart started pounding, but I'd been expecting this. "Family." "Yeah, they're in the parking lot. Said they'd wait as long as it takes." I glanced toward the exit, weighing my options. I could slip out the back, avoid them entirely, but running would only delay the inevitable. Besides, I was curious to see how they'd try to spin this now that their cash flow had been cut off. I clocked out early and walked to the front parking lot. There they were, Mom, Dad, and Brandon, standing next to Dad's old pickup truck like some kind of intervention committee. Mom looked furious, Dad looked impatient, and Brandon looked worried. That was new. "There she is," Mom said as I approached, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Our daughter who's too good to answer her phone anymore." "I changed my number," I said simply. "We noticed," Dad said, "along with a few other changes, like the complete stop in your so-called financial support." The words so-called hit exactly as intended, but this time, I was ready for them. "You mean the $2,200 I was sending every month? The money you told me was only 50 cents. Brandon stepped forward, his charm-offensive smile already in place. "Haley, there's obviously been a huge misunderstanding. Why don't we go somewhere and talk this through like adults?" "Adults don't lie to each other for months," I said, looking directly at him. "Adults don't gaslight their family members into thinking they're worthless while they fund gambling habits." Mom's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about your casino trips, your new electronics, Dad's sports betting, all funded by money you claimed I wasn't sending." The silence stretched between us like a canyon. Dad was the first to recover. "Even if that were true, and I'm not saying it is, you're still our daughter. You have responsibilities to this family." "Our responsibilities." The word came out harsher than I'd intended. What responsibilities did Brandon have when he was getting music lessons and a car and college funding? What responsibilities did I have when I was sleeping in a moldy basement so he could have the good room? "That's different," Mom said quickly. "Brandon had potential. Had potential, not has had, because what exactly is he doing now? What's this Hunter Gray Associates business that doesn't seem to exist anywhere?" Brandon's face flushed red. "I don't have to justify my career to you." "Career." I almost laughed. "Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been living off the money I send Mom and Dad while they convince me I'm not contributing enough." "You're being paranoid," Dad said, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. I pulled out my phone and showed them the screenshots I'd saved Brandon's social media posts. The expensive purchases, all time-stamped just days after my monthly transfers. Am I because the timeline is pretty interesting? I send money on the 15th of every month. By the 20th, you're posting photos from restaurants that cost more than my weekly groceries budget. Mom snatched at my phone, but I pulled it back. Give me that. No. The word came out stronger than I'd ever felt. I'm done being your personal ATM while you treat me like I'm worthless. I'm done working myself to death so you can pretend I don't exist. If you stop helping this family, Dad said, his voice turning threatening, there will be consequences. Like what? You'll ignore me, treat me like I don't matter, make me feel like a failure. I shook my head. You've been doing that my whole life. I'm just finally paying attention. I turned to walk away, but Brandon caught my arm. Haley, wait, you don't understand Mom and Dad. They're not in great financial shape. They actually need the help. Then they shouldn't have lied to me about it, and you shouldn't have helped them. What if we could work something out? He said desperately. Maybe a smaller amount, something more manageable for you. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. He looked genuinely panicked, like his whole world was crumbling. Then I remembered the designer clothes, the expensive dinners, the year of my life I'd lost to exhaustion and deprivation. The only thing I'm going to work out, I said, pulling my arm free, is how to rebuild my life without any of you in it. I walked away, leaving them standing in the parking lot. Behind me, I heard Mom calling my name, Dad shouting something about family loyalty, Brandon trying to mediate, but their voices faded as I got further away, until all I could hear was the sound of my own footsteps and the feeling of freedom spreading through my chest like sunlight. For 2 weeks, I lived in blissful silence. No angry phone calls, no guilt trips, no demands for money I couldn't afford to give. I started sleeping better, eating actual meals instead of subsisting on ramen, and for the first time in months, I had money left over after paying my bills. It felt like emerging from underwater and finally being able to breathe. Then they found my new address. I came home from work on a Thursday evening to find all 3 of them sitting on the steps of my apartment building. Mom was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Dad looked stern and paternal, and Brandon was pacing like a caged animal. The sight of them there, invading the one space I thought was safe, made my stomach drop. How did you find me? I asked, stopping several feet away. You're still our daughter, Dad said, as if that explained everything. We have ways. I thought about my lease application, my work address, the dozen small connections that tied me to them whether I wanted them or not. Privacy was apparently a luxury I couldn't afford in a family like mine. We need to talk, Mom said, her voice thick with tears. Really talk, without all this anger and misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, I said firmly. You lied to me about the money. You've been using what I send to fund your entertainment while telling me I'm worthless. That's not, Brandon started. It's exactly what happened. I was surprised by how calm I sounded. I have the bank records. I have the screenshots. I know the truth. Dad stood up, his face darkening. The truth is that your mother and I raised you, clothed you, fed you for 18 years. We sacrificed so you could have a roof over your head and opportunities in life. If you think those debts are just erased because you're angry about some money. Some money. I laughed, and the sound was bitter even to my own ears. $24,000 is not some money. That's a year of my life. That's every extra shift I worked, every meal I skipped, every comfort I denied myself. And we're grateful for it, Mom said quickly. But Haley, there's something you don't know, something we haven't told you. Here it comes, I thought, the new manipulation, the fresh guilt trip designed to get me back in line. Your grandfather Harold's trust fund, Dad said, the one he left specifically for you. We've been managing it since his death, making sure it grows properly. But the way it's structured, if you cut ties with the family, if you abandon your responsibilities to us. He let the sentence hang in the air like a threat. I felt the blood drain from my face. Grandpa Harold had been the one person in my family who'd ever really seen me. who'd encouraged my photography and told me I was smart enough to do anything I wanted. He'd died when I was 25, and I'd known he'd left me something, but my parents had always been vague about the details. "What about the trust?" I asked, though I was already dreading the answer. "It's structured as a family legacy fund," Brandon said, jumping in with obvious relief. "The money stays in the family as long as everyone fulfills their obligations. But if someone abandons their responsibilities, the funds get redistributed to the remaining family members," Dad finished. It was Harold's way of ensuring family loyalty. Mom reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder. "The documentation is all here." Harold was very specific about the terms. Regular financial contributions to family members in need, maintaining family relationships, supporting each other through difficult times. I stared at the folder, my mind racing. The trust fund had always been this nebulous future thing, something I'd inherit eventually but never really counted on. Now they were telling me it was conditional on being their personal bank account. "How much?" I asked quietly. $87,000, Dad said, plus interest accumulated over the years, probably closer to $110,000 now. The number hit me like a physical blow. $110,000, enough to change my life completely, enough to go back to school, start over, maybe even pursue the photography dreams I'd abandoned years ago. And all I had to do was keep letting them drain me dry. "Let me see the documentation," I said, reaching for the folder. Dad pulled it back. "This stays with us, but I can tell you that your recent behavior cutting off family support, refusing to communicate, it's putting your inheritance at serious risk." "The trust is reviewed annually," Mom added. "Every December, the trustees evaluate whether the beneficiaries have met their obligations. If they haven't, the money goes to Brandon," I said, understanding flooding through me. "The money goes to the family members who've honored their commitments," Dad corrected, but his meaning was clear. I looked at the three of them, standing there with their ultimatum disguised as concern. They'd found my weakness, and they were pressing on it with surgical precision. The trust fund wasn't just money, it was the validation I'd been seeking my whole life, proof that someone in my family had valued me enough to provide for my future. "I need time to think about this," I said finally. "Of course," Mom said, her relief obvious. "But don't take too long. The annual review is coming up in a few months, and the trustees need to see a pattern of family commitment." "We'll be in touch," Dad said, pocketing the folder. "I'm sure you'll make the right decision." They left me standing there in front of my apartment building, my mind spinning with calculations. $110,000 versus my freedom, my grandfather's love versus my family's manipulation. As I climbed the stairs to my apartment, one thought kept circling through my head. I needed to know if that trust fund actually existed, and if it did, what the real terms were, because something about their story didn't feel right. Something about it felt like another lie in a long chain of lies. And I was done taking my family's word for anything. The next morning, I called the law firm that had handled my grandfather's estate. It took 3 transfers and 20 minutes on hold, but I finally reached Margaret Steinberg, the attorney who'd worked with Grandpa Harold. "Ms. Monroe," she said warmly, "I remember you from the reading of the will. How can I help you?" "I have some questions about my grandfather's trust fund. My family is telling me there are conditions I wasn't aware of, and I'd like to understand the actual terms." There was a pause. "I'm sorry. Could you clarify what you mean by conditions?" I explained what my parents had told me the family loyalty requirements, the financial obligations, the threat of losing the inheritance if I didn't support them. With each detail, the silence on the other end grew longer. "Ms. Monroe," Margaret said finally, "I think you need to come in immediately. There are some things we need to discuss." 2 hours later, I sat in her downtown office while she pulled out a thick file with my grandfather's name on it. "Your grandfather's trust is what we call an unconditional inheritance," she said gently. "The money is yours, period. No strings attached, no family obligations. No requirements to maintain relationships with anyone. Harold was very specific about that. My hands started shaking. But my parents said, "Your parents have been lying to you." Her voice was kind but firm. "The trust was established with you as the sole beneficiary the moment you turned 21. The money has been sitting in an investment account, growing, waiting for you to claim it." "How much?" "As of last month, $143,000. The room tilted. Not only did the money exist, but there was more of it than my parents had claimed, and it had been mine for over a decade. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" Margaret looked uncomfortable. "We sent notification letters to your address on file, your parents' house. We also tried calling several times over the years. They never told me." "I'm beginning to understand that, Ms. Monroe. I think your family has been intercepting our communications for years. That's actually illegal." I spent the next hour signing papers and learning about my inheritance. The money would be transferred to my personal account within 3 business days. My grandfather had also left a letter, which Margaret handed me with a sad smile. "He wanted you to have this when you claimed the trust." I opened it with trembling hands. Grandpa Harold's familiar handwriting covered 2 pages, but one paragraph made me cry right there in the lawyer's office. "Haley, my dear granddaughter, I know your family doesn't always see your worth, but I do. You are smart, capable, and deserving of every happiness. This money is yours alone. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Use it to build the life you want, not the life others expect you to live." That evening, I called Lena and told her everything. Then I asked for one more favor. "I need you to help me make sure everyone knows the truth about my family. All of it." "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking it's time for some public accountability." Lena helped me compile everything: bank statements showing my real contributions, screenshots of my family's gambling and luxury purchases, proof of Brandon's lies about his business, evidence of the intercepted trust fund communications. We created a detailed timeline showing exactly how they'd manipulated me. Then I contacted Marcus Hoffman, a local investigative journalist who'd written about financial abuse within families. He was immediately interested in the story. "This is a perfect example of how family financial abuse operates," he said. "The victim often doesn't realize what's happening because they trust the abusers." The article published on a Tuesday morning with the headline, "Local Family's Decade-Long Deception: How They Stole from Their Own Daughter." It included bank records, social media screenshots, and expert commentary on family financial abuse. By noon, it had been shared over 2,000 times. My phone, my new, private number that only Lena and my work had stayed blissfully quiet. But according to the comment section in social media, my family's phones were ringing constantly. Friends, neighbors, extended family members, all demanding explanations. The article detailed everything: Brandon's fake consulting business, my parents' gambling funded by my money, their lies about the trust fund, the way they'd systematically isolated and manipulated me. The community they'd lived in for 30 years was learning exactly who they really were. Marcus called me that evening with an update. "I've had 12 other people reach out with similar stories about your family," he said. "Apparently this pattern goes back years. Your cousin Michelle wants to talk about money they borrowed and never returned. A former neighbor says your parents convinced her elderly mother to lend them money for fake medical bills." I wasn't surprised. Predators rarely have just one victim. The follow-up article published a week later with an even bigger impact. By then, my family had been forced to move out of their rental house. The landlord had evicted them once he learned about their financial practices. Brandon's social media accounts had been deleted. Dad had been banned from his sports betting group for defaulting on debts. I took a month off work, using my grandfather's money to rest and recover from the year of abuse. When I returned, I started taking evening classes in digital photography. For the first time in my adult life, I was building something for myself instead of sacrificing for people who didn't deserve it. The money my grandfather left me didn't just buy my freedom, it bought my truth. And sometimes, The truth is the most powerful revenge of all. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that you deserve better than people who take advantage of your love. Please comment below and let me know where you're listening from. I'd love to connect with others who might have similar experiences. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts about family boundaries and standing up for yourself.